Okay, my next guest needs no introduction, Congressman Ron Paul, who for nearly 30 years, a member of Congress, two-time presidential candidate. I mean, just incredible. All those years that you were in Congress, did you ever think you would see the day that with 4 young women come to Congress, all the opportunity in the world that this country's given these 4 women, they would have the attitude they have? And Judicial Watch just filed a House ethics complaint against Elena Omar for perjury, immigration fraud, marriage fraud, state and federal tax fraud, federal student loan fraud. God, you go all the way back in Congress. You have to look at this and just say something's changed here in Congress. Just love to get your take on that.
Well, you know, over the years there have been individuals who have done some pretty nasty things and have, been thrown out, and that's one thing. But this is different, and it calls your attention to it because it's much more philosophical. It isn't just one bad person. And it's a group of people representing a whole philosophy. It represents what's happening in our universities, and I think it's very, very different. And they're out front. They're very aggressive. So I think that this cannot be ignored. But I also think that the answer to it is refuting what they say with ideas and saying, everything you're saying it doesn't make any sense. And if you want to live in a totalitarian state and live like they do in Venezuela, then you listen to those ideas, but we have a better idea.
Why is it the old guard, been there for years, let's take the Democratic side, they just seem to go along? I mean, I'm talking about members that have been there for 20 years. They just seem to go along and they want to fall in line with her and like she's the leader. And second part of that question is Pelosi. How does she fit in this? She's got to be aggravated, no?
See, I don't think the people you're talking about there have a philosophy. They're pushed by people with philosophies, the people who want welfare and the people on the conservative side who want the militarism, and they reflect that. But they don't really have strong beliefs. So if they think the power and the money and the prestige and to be able to get reelected and get the power, you toe the line. So people aren't chairmen of committees that have any individual thinking. So they're not logical in that sense. They're logical in the political sense. They're very logical and they're shrewd and they respond and they get ahead. And I would say that my approach was exactly opposite, and that's why I didn't become chairman of the banking committee, even though I had seniority and all these things, because to do that you have to be part of the system, and that's why they fall in line. When you get several individuals coming along and they're getting the attention of the whole nation, they become a political force, and the people without beliefs are easily intimidated. And what you're talking about is they're easily intimidated. Don't they believe in anything? Why don't they even stand up for their principles even when they're wrong? They just go along because their goal is political power and political, establishment power that they get when they go to Congress.
And so they're like a glue. They're just, no matter who it is, they'll stick to that glue.
If it's in their interest, their political interest, right?
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the hearing. What is it with these Democrats that they think that is going to happen tomorrow at these hearings, that all of a sudden the American people go, oh yeah, I get it. I read the report. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, the president's got to be impeached. Is that going to backfire?
Well, I would think so. It has started to already. But they have the people who have benefited by this, who listened to this, and a lot of people did, because they couldn't believe what was happening, that is Trump getting elected. And then they also figured that no matter what the Democrats may have done wrong, we have control of the media, and the media really, pushed this whole scenario, and they were able to do it. And it's gone on for 3 years. So it's pretty amazing. They have to be really, really out of it to have lost grounds on this, because, it was all fake stuff and the news is fake, and people, maybe this is a real good sign that people are waking up. And yet tomorrow, who knows, they don't give up though. I mean, the liberal media will spin this and say, see, we have proof now. We have proof now that Trump has to be impeached, but the people who move those issues, like Pelosi, I think that's stretching it all, and I don't think it's going to lead to that. Because they're working on a lie, and hopefully the American people are starting to see what's going on.
Well, the dossier and all that you hear everybody, I shouldn't say hear everybody talk about, but Hannity, for example, I think has done a great job bringing it to the forefront. What is the deal with that? I heard the committee chairman say, "Oh, we already looked into that. That's nothing. That's a nothing burger. There's nothing wrong with that." I mean, what is the story? I mean, he was on Sunday. I can't think of his name, the chairman's name now. It just escapes me. Jerry Nadler. He was like, "Oh, no. He said, that's not, we already looked into that, and there's nothing wrong there." I go, what?
Well, they were blackmailing the president. They don't want you to look at it now because they were, trying to, make the president look so bad that he was a criminal and they were going to impeach him and put him in prison and all these things. So, they got caught, and they never thought they would. They thought they were handpicked by the deep state, and it turns out that there's a limit, how far you can push lies. And so fortunately, there's enough people around that have exposed them, but they're not going to quit. They're not going to quit, and that's what this whole thing is about, is to keep it alive. And what they're praying for, politically speaking, is that there'll be more people who will force them into a year of hearings on impeachment, which would really keep this alive. It would be very negative, for Trump, even though there would be no more truths told or found than they already have found. But I think there have been some investigations on the individuals who portrayed this fraud and this conspiracy against the president. So I just don't think that the liberal Democrats are going to be the champions and win the day tomorrow.
But are the liberals better at this? The Democrats better at this than Republicans? This kind of stuff?
The Democrats?
Yeah, only because they have the press on their side. Is that why they're better at it?
I think that's the case, but I don't see things in the way of political parties. I mean, and as a matter of fact, today my program was, I'm convinced there's too much bipartisanship, and they do all the big things. Just think of what happened on this budget deal.
Oh yeah.
Pelosi and the president are best friends, and they struck a bill that is going to get rid of the debt limit for 2 years, and they increased spending by $320 billion, and they declare as a champion. So, for many reasons, they're very, very close together, and so some of this sparring is just for their base, and this sparring in the presidency was a little bit unusual, in that they were so shocked and so surprised that a guy like Trump could win. But that might be a good sign that the American people are sick and tired of the status quo.
The debt limit. Let's talk about that a little bit. Most people don't even know what the debt limit is. But why? It seems like there's no limit to the debt, but they call it a debt limit. Maybe you could explain that a little bit. Well, I just it's for the ordinary person.
It's never limited anything. I always thought they should go through the ritual, because every once in a while they make the point, well, maybe we'll have to close down the government, which they never do. Right. They close down a monument and think they're doing it. So, in some ways you could say, well, at least they're more honest about it. It makes no difference. They're going to spend anyway, and the limits, it won't limit the government spending. And it's bipartisan. Republicans want spending, and they said the agreement was they would work it out because the Democrats got an equal amount of increase in spending on domestic things, and the Republicans got to get their share to militarize the world, and that is the deal. But Democrats are just as militaristic as the Republicans are. I mean, Obama was very militaristic. He carried on those wars in the Middle East, started that thing in Ukraine, and all that spending. And the Republicans are not much better on welfare. They vote for all that. So it's a one party system. The only thing that's going to limit it is the bankruptcy. And that's why people are realizing that the bankruptcy, we're in the beginning and we'll be in the midst of it, and that means things will quit functioning. People are sort of frightened about it, and they don't have an answer, and that's why, well, it looks like we're going to have zero rate interest just pump out the money and everybody's going to take it and everybody's going to be happy. But the monetary system is philosophically bankrupt, but it's materially bankrupt too, because it doesn't function. Nobody pays that much attention to it. I mean, this whole idea of negative interest rates for over $13 trillion in the world today is just total insanity.
So that was my next question. You know, as the guy in the street, he listens to these TV jibber-jabbers on these financial shows.
Consumer and business confidence remains strong. The U.S. economy will remain strong from here.
Every economic aspect of our country is the best it has ever been.
This is the greatest economy ever.
And everything's great. We have the greatest economy ever, the best 85 years, the best this, the best half year in the stock market. Everything's wonderful. I mean, this wall of worry, every day we get more negative news. That negative news is another brick, another pile. The wall gets higher and higher, and everybody's climbing this wall of worry. Nobody seems to care. There's such complacency. Oh, not to worry, because, oh, by the way, guess what? We're going to go back to another QE. We're going to get QE4 here because we're going to start lowering the interest rates on the short term. That'll mean everybody will get out of the bond market, buy stocks. That means all the interest rates on the long term, mortgages will go up, and then we have to come back and say, oh, we got to save the mortgage industry, so let's go do QE. Let's buy these mortgages. Nobody else is buying bonds. Is that where they're going with this?
Yeah, they are, but they're comfortable with it because the people I knew in Washington and in Congress had never been exposed essentially to Austrian free market economics and a system that didn't have a central bank, and they've been taught, you know, Keynesian economics or some modification of it. Deficits don't matter, and deficits spending, is beneficial. It helps the people, and wars get us out of depressions. And that's all been preached to them, and so they don't feel like they're going astray. But others with a little bit more of a brain are saying, I guess we're going a little bit too far, but I can't really tell them what I really think. It's like we've spent a lot of time. And the one thing they don't admit to, and you say there's a lot of people say, well, things are going pretty good, but there are two groups of people in the country, and some people aren't benefiting by it. So for the larger number of people, the wealth discrepancy is there because wages and real income has not kept up anywhere near the cost of living going up if you go over a 40-year period, especially since the breakdown at Bretton Woods. The cost of living for houses and all have gone up much faster, and that's why they can't buy houses. And so those people are depressed and usually never even accounted for in the unemployment polling.
Right, and the thing is that if you look really at the facts, I mean, when they put that program together, President Obama, and he started to sell all these bankruptcy homes to BlackRock or the rest of them on Wall Street, and then they turned around and rented them. Houses just went through I'm talking about my area here in Tampa, Sarasota. The homes that were left, that were owned, they skyrocketed 50%. Well, all these other homes now are off the market, and now they're being used as rentals. But wages didn't go up 50%. We both know that. And at this point, it seems like we're reaching a critical point where from 2008 to 2019, this fake recovery, there really was never recovery. As long as someone could keep their interest rates low enough to give them a car, give them a house, okay, this is cool, I feel okay about it. But at some point, if they do another QE, how can we go another 5 years even on this fake stock market, but yet the guy who's working, everyday guy on Main Street, he's getting screwed, and he sees it's hard for him. He's working 2-3 jobs. I mean, can we actually do another QE for another 5 or 10 years, just keep the market going up while everybody else is getting screwed?
No, I mean, they're doing it mainly to keep the stocks high. But there is a limit. We just don't know what the limit is. But and you mentioned that some people have 2 or 3 jobs, and there are some people living on the street that have a job, and maybe 2 jobs, but they just can't get into a house or pay the rent. And then they say, then the socialists that we started off with, they say, see, what you need is socialism. This is what you're doing. This is what capitalism does to the people. It puts you out in the street and all these things. But I think the biggest challenge we have who believe in freedom and a market economy and sound money is to not identify ourselves and defend what we have. because sometimes the Republicans do that. They say, well, this is wonderful, and the socialists want to get rid of it and turn us into Venezuela. No, we're not quite Venezuela, but we aren't a free market economy. We're one that you've already mentioned. The prosperity, so-called prosperity, the last 10 years has been by debt, increasing debt and printing money.
Right.
And sure, a counterfeiter gets away with it for a long time until somebody say, hey, you know that money this guy's been sending, that's actually counterfeit money. Then all of a sudden it quits. So there'll be a day everybody's going to wake up and say the dollar's counterfeit and all the paper currencies are counterfeit, and then you're going to have some real excitement and hopefully not too much violence.
You brought a good point up in the very beginning. You talked about our colleges, and I think that was a good point, because what do we do? I mean, it seems like this squad, as they call them, and the younger people, the door to socialism is opening, and it seems like the door starts at the college education. It seems like these are the professors. Now it seems like after, let's say, 10, 15 years, that is really, the college professors, it's really starting to work. Their narrative of socialism starting to work. How do you combat that? I pay $30,000 a year for my son to go to college, and he's listening to a socialist in college, a communist. How do you fix that? How do you stop that narrative?
You can't depend on people getting education there. That's why I have a homeschooling program for 12 years, and I think groups like the Mises Institute is where people should be getting their education. There are some professors out there, and there's a few in some of the smaller colleges, but this idea of the expense of these colleges and listening to it. But the worst part is not that their economics is bad. It's some of this social stuff, this social justice warriors going around telling people what they can say and do, and political correctness. They're totally off track. And my kids are all grown and been through school, and most of them stayed in science, which helps, right, because there's not as much harm done in studying the sciences. But when it comes to the social studies, they're just so bad that people have to reconsider why $30,000. I understand people spend a lot more money than that. And then they're saying, well, borrow it. So they borrow it, and now there's $1.6 trillion worth of student debt. And these are the who put these programs together. It was the intelligent people at the universities who pushed all that. So it has to end if we want to live in any sort of a free society. And right now, I mentioned on my program today that the republic has been disintegrating for a good while. But lately now I look at it that they're putting the last few nails in the coffin of the republic that we once had, because it's so out of control. And I was talking also about this new bill today that protects the CIA agents so that you can never arrest them, and that if you're somebody like Assange, you're going to go to prison for life. And that's a law they're getting ready to pass. So wow, that's the destruction of liberty, the destruction of our republic and our Constitution.
So what's the, and I'll let you go, what is the end result here for the president for the next couple of years? I mean, hopefully he gets reelected. I'm sure he will. I just hate to see a disruption halfway through. But what's his game plan? What does he have to do for the next couple of years to? Is it just he's going to try to survive, or is that going to be his mode right now?
I think he thinks about that every single day, and but every other day the strategy may well change. And that's the whole thing. No, it's not viable, because he's not a conservative. He's not a fiscal conservative. From my viewpoint, I don't like the empire. I don't think we should be running an empire and running the Middle East and having troops all over the place and thinking that military spending is the most wonderful thing in the world. So it's not viable. That's part of the problem, but I'm sure what he's working on hardest. He thinks about the Federal Reserve every day, probably more than I do, because the Federal Reserve, if they thought it was necessary to return to a more sensible monetary policy where interest rates more reflected the market, the interest rates would go up some, which would all of a sudden cause a crash in the stock market.
Oh, yes.
So he's not going to. He he's really intimidating enough to keep the Fed from raising interest rates. But there's a limit to that, too. Sometimes lowering interest rates means that they're so desperate and it becomes a negative rather than a positive for the stock market. So when the stock market cracks, just raising interest rates might mean that it'll explode even more so. So I think that's what Trump thinks about, and quite frankly, I think about it, too, from his viewpoint, because I think some of the creeps that are running on the other side would be a disaster. But he thinks about keeping the stock market up, and that's and I think there's probably more than a 50-50 chance that our economy will have turned down before the next election.
I think so too, and I think that agreed, because when you look at all the real numbers, the debt numbers, and then you see the amount of household debt, and then wages, I have to laugh. Oh, the wages, biggest wage increase, 3.1%,
Yeah.
That's like, what, 6 cents an hour? My God, healthcare does it. At the bottom line, it always comes back to wages, right? Because not everybody's in the stock market. Their wealth is their home. Their wealth is their wages, not the stock market. And that's where I believe is the undercurrent. That's where things are going to start falling apart, and finally we'll have a crash. I mean, I just don't see how the average guy making $45,000 a year, his wife's working, they can't keep going back to credit cards every month after they pay their bills. Am I right?
And they have no savings.
Right.
You've seen these statistics that show that if they're out of work for a month, they're bone dry,
Thank you so much for your interview. It was great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice to be with you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay.
Thank you.
Nice to be with you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay.
Thank you.
Nice to be with you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay.